name is Jasmine Sky, and I'm here today with the second part of my Q&A video that I had filmed and then I lost the footage of. So if you did not see part 1 of my Q&A, I will link it up there. I think it's there. And you can go check it out and listen to my answers for the first half of the questions that I received when I asked for Q&A questions. Today I'm going to cover how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more questions that were asked for my first Q&A on this channel. Before I get into that though, I do want to bring attention to the Florida Don't Say Gay bill that was just passed and all of the other negative and very harmful anti-LGBTQIA+ legislation and directives that are sort of cropping up in the US, and I am going to add some links down in the description below. I always have causes that need your support, and I have some links down there for you to check out and give your support if you can. I'm wearing my Disney shirt today because I want to talk about the responsibility that large corporations like Disney have and the responsibility that anyone who has any amount of power and privilege have to speak up for causes that need support, such as in the case right now of trans youth in America and also of queer youth in general in America. There's also some links in there about Ukraine and the situation in Ukraine and the horrible attack of Russia on Ukraine, so check that out too. But today I'm bringing attention especially to the queer youth in America. Yeah, let's get on to these questions that I was asked. The first few questions come from my friend Lara Amin. I'm going to put them up right here. Lara asked me 4 questions total on Twitter, and I answered 2 of them in my previous Q&A, and I'm going to answer the second half of those in this Q&A. So Lara asked me, would you still consider trying to traditionally publish your MFA thesis, Kingfisher? And can you talk about the process of writing Kingfisher and how that led to drafting/querying Daughter of the Bone Forest? So if you don't know, my debut, Daughter of the Bone Forest, is coming out with Viola and Friends in winter 2024. Daughter of the Bone Forest was the book that got me my agent. Before I got my agent with Daughter of the Bone Forest, I was querying a different book called Kingfisher. Kingfisher was my MFA thesis. I actually have a bound copy of it here, which is very exciting. You can see right here that this is my thesis for my MFA program, and I am just very proud of this book, and I am proud of how much I grew in the process of writing this book for my MFA. This is the first book that I learned how to revise. I did a lot of writing before this book. I wrote multiple novels and novel-length work, and none of them I revised in the sense of like a big developmental revision. I would do little copy editing and polishing, but I didn't learn to revise until I got to my MFA and revised Kingfisher. So Kingfisher means a lot to me, and I did try to get Kingfisher published. I queried it 80 times, but never got an agent out of it, which I know now is a combination of reasons. One, it's not the most marketable idea in the form that it exists now, and it's a Greek myth retelling, but it's a really obscure Greek myth retelling, so it's kind of a combination of just things that didn't really work in terms of marketability in the current YA market. So the question is, would I still consider trying to publish Kingfisher? Yes, I would, but only with major changes. If I were to publish Kingfisher or try to publish Kingfisher in the future, I would remove the Greek myth elements. The core ideas of Kingfisher don't require it. In fact, the Greek myth part was kind of window dressing that came later. The plot of Kingfisher has nothing to do with the Greek myth part, with, you know, only slight window dressing parts of the plot that do have to do with it that could very easily be scrubbed out. So maybe one day I will consider going back to Kingfisher, but it would be very changed, and that's okay. My first draft of Daughter of the Bone Forest was very deliberately a book that I wrote in response to the fact that I realized that Kingfisher was not very marketable in the current YA market. So I was like, you know what is kind of big right now? Witch books. And I wanted to write my version of a witch book because I have a lot of sort of personal experience with actual living witchcraft and those kinds of abilities, and I wanted to create a magic system that was based off of my own personal experience with the witch community, like the living witch community. Even though my book is more of a medieval fantasy, I am basing my magic system for the most part. It's a little bit more enhanced. There's like full-on shape-shifting and stuff, but I'm basing my magic system off of, at least for the witches, off of something that is very real to me, which is a whole video that I could talk about at some other point. But yeah, I wrote the first draft of Daughter of the Bone Forest, which at the time was just called The Bone Forest, because I wanted to write a sapphic story that had that fun witchcraft magic system that I thought I could write really well and that I hadn't seen. There's a lot of really amazing witch books in the YA space, but none that really speak to my sort of knowledge and love of witchcraft. So I wanted to write my version of that. I wanted to write a story with sort of a living setting, which is the Bone Forest, and it all kind of combined and created a much more marketable story, which is one of the reasons that Daughter of the Bone Forest got me my agent, and that eventually, with a lot of work and revision, also got me my first book deal. The next question that Lara asked was, do you have a preferred tense or POV that you like to write in? No, I tend to write in the tense/POV that best suits the book. I have written everything except for second person. I have written first person present, first person past, third person present, third person past, and I've liked it all. It really depends on the book. Daughter of the Bone Forest is first person past. It's a somewhat dual POV first person past, which I never thought I would write. I don't tend to enjoy first person dual POV, but I have come to appreciate it more, and I have come to appreciate first person in general more. I struggled with first person. My earlier books were all in third person. Third person is kind of my home. Third person past, because I grew up reading medieval, like classic medieval fantasy, so third person past is kind of the classic tense that you use, but I've come to appreciate the differences, and I'm not even against trying second person at some point in the future. N.K. Jemisin did it in a, you know, medievalish fantasy, so like it's something I would consider doing if the story called for it. Not a lot of stories call for second person, so but definitely first or third, past or present tense. It just depends on the vibe that I'm trying to weave with the story. Next question is from Carissa. Carissa asked, tell us when you found out you were going to get published. Where were you? How did you feel? How did you celebrate? Well, I talked about this a little bit in my like how I got my book deal video, but I found out about my book deal on December 1st. I was in the office at my day job, and my agent called me, and I was a combination of relieved, in disbelief, shocked, anxious, excited. Like there were so many emotions that I can't really explain everything. Like it was a lot of shock, I think. It was just a lot of like my body just kind of shut down and wasn't really sure how to process all the emotions that were racing through me. But yeah, it was the afternoon on a Wednesday, December 1st, and I got the call, and I stumbled out of my office crying, and my coworkers were like, are you okay? And I told them that I got the book deal, and I was just overwhelmed. I was so overwhelmed about it. The real sort of emotional celebration happened when I announced the deal, which was like a month ago. And when I was able to announce it on Twitter and got to see people's excitement about it, that's when I really felt excited. The actual book deal offer, the whole time from when I got the offer to when I was able to announce, like I kept thinking that it wasn't real, that they were gonna take it back, that like I was just so worried about it the entire time. There was a lot of anxiety, honestly, on with the whole process, and it took so much time and effort, and it just kind of threw me for an emotional loop. So the excitement has come later. That being said, I didn't really celebrate when I first got the book deal. My biggest celebration was when I got to announce it. That was the biggest emotional sort of huzzah that I got to have, and I'm still riding on the high of that announcement and people being excited about my debut. It's something that I just really appreciate, that people are excited about it and that I've gotten such a positive response to my debut announcement. But I haven't really celebrated. I didn't really do anything like go out to eat or, you know, do something special. I'm not a drinker, so I didn't like have a celebratory drink. I didn't do anything. But my friends and I are planning on doing a friend trip to Vegas in April, which I've talked about in my writing vlogs, because I hope to get this current draft of Daughter of the Bone Forest done before I go on this trip. And that's gonna be my celebration now. I was able to get BTS tickets, which I'm so excited about, and we have a ton of other fun activities lined up. We're going to explore Vegas and really get to do the Vegas experience, which I've never done before. So that'll be my excitement. That's kind of how I'm spending like some of my advance, is as a celebration, getting to do this fun friendcation. Next question is by Ren Hutchings, who is one of my Twitter mutuals / author mentor match mentor friends. Thank you, Ren, for this question. Ren's debut, by the way, is coming out this year. I will put it up there. You should definitely check it out if you are interested at all in fun science fiction, sort of time travel-y nonsense. I am super excited. I pre-ordered it. I'm so ready for it to come and read all about that. I really love a good sci-fi time travel story, and this one just sounds like a lot of fun. But anyway, Ren's question was, what's the first story you ever remember writing, and does it have any themes or elements in common with your debut? What themes do you always come back to in your stories? Love this question. The first story I ever remember writing was an assignment that I had to write for 3rd grade. Everyone in my 3rd grade class had to write a book, like basically a picture book. And my picture book was about a man named Matt who lived in a neighborhood with a bunch of talking animals. There was like Mr. and Mrs. Butterfly, Mr. and Mrs. Dog, stuff like that, right? I remember distinctly Mr. and Mrs. Butterfly, but I don't remember every other animal couple that was in this neighborhood, but all of his friends were all animals, and Matt was the only human. And one of the animals, one of the neighbors, gets like kidnapped or taken hostage by this like evil organization, and Matt and the other neighbors all go like rescue this animal. So I guess it's kind of like a thriller that I wrote in 3rd grade. It was the first story I ever wrote. And then in 4th grade, I discovered the Atlanta the Lioness series by Tamara Pierce, literally this book. I discovered in my school library in 4th grade, and starting at the end of 4th grade through 5th grade and beyond, I fell in love with medieval fantasy, and I started writing medieval fantasy. The first medieval fantasy I ever wrote, I was co-writing with a friend in 5th grade. It was about these 2 princesses that lived in this kingdom, and there was a war, and it was like very silly. They like thought of a plan to use like peanut butter cannonballs to like stop the enemy army from advancing, like all sorts of weird, silly stuff like that. And then by the time I was 13, 14, I started writing pretty much exclusively queer fantasy stories. I wrote a lot of contemporary fantasy and a lot of medieval fantasy, and that is to this day pretty much what I write, with the occasional sci-fi sprinkled in. And yes, there are tropes that I come back to again and again from that very first thriller picture book I wrote with Matt and his animal friends. I come back to stories about communities coming together, about friends banding together in order to you know, go up against a supposedly insurmountable foe and defeat them. That is something that I really like, and that is a theme that is in my debut, is a group of people becoming friends and banding together to, you know, defeat the foe. That's kind of like the theme of the duology. The first book is more about the the two main characters. The second book brings in the rest of the friend group that's introduced in the first book and really is about that sort of banding together and supporting each other. I really like tropes about people supporting each other platonically and romantically. So I come back to that again and again. Once I really fell into medieval fantasy, I fell into tropes of nobility and royalty and power imbalance and power dynamics, and those tropes kind of grew and expanded as I got older. So that is something that tends to be a part of all of my stories, is how to rebalance a relationship. Again, I love writing about relationships. How do you rebalance a relationship that is innately imbalanced because of a power imbalance, right? And how do you give power back to the person who is perhaps from a lower class in society, or doesn't have as much physical power in the situation, or whatever it may be. It's really hard to ever make a relationship between a royal and a commoner in a, you know, feudalistic society truly equal. But there are ways that you can emotionally give the power back to the person who is politically or socially less powerful, if that makes sense. And that is, again, tropes that I have been playing with basically since I was 10, 11 years old. I think someone who grew up being female-bodied in a lot of male sort of dominant spaces, and also someone who knew I was queer really, really young, and growing up in the 90s and early thousands, which were not nice to queer youth at all. There was a lot of sort of inherent imbalance in my life that I really saw with both sexism and heterosexism and homophobia and transphobia, and all of this stuff were things that I was dealing and combating growing up. I also grew up with a very diverse friend group and in a very multicultural family, both multicultural racially and ethnically, but also religiously. I would go to the Jewish Community Center growing up, but then also my mom tried to get us to go to Sunday school, which did not last very long. And then my grandmother was doing crystal healing and sort of more shamanistic practices on me growing up. So like I had this very weird mix of family and friends that were sort of from a ton of different cultures, basically. And I grew up in this very sort of weird kind of liminal space in a lot of ways. I also grew up in a medieval recreation society called the SEA. So we're going back to that sort of like hierarchy tropes that tend to come back in my stories. The SEA has a hierarchy system. It has kings and queens and dukes and duchesses and all of the above. And I grew up learning that when someone comes around with a crown on their head, you're supposed to bow or curtsy, right? So like I had a very strange upbringing in some ways with regards to all of these different cultures coming in. One of my most distinct memories from when I was in middle school was babysitting my cousin, whose mom is Vietnamese American, and being taught by her that since I was the oldest female child at the dinner table, I was the one that was expected to serve everyone else at the table. And like, I don't know, like those kinds of cultural things were sort of always a part of my life, and something that I always was very excited to try and learn about. It's hard to explain. There were so many things in my life growing up where I saw the consequences of a very negative power imbalance, and where I also saw some of the beauty of a hierarchical system, or ways in which you can have a power imbalance and it not be negative. I really learned to observe the way that different sort of cultural hierarchies and cultural sort of power systems worked, and the differences between them. And that, I think, combined with also the way that I saw how power could be used in a very negative way with bullying and homophobia and sexism and racism, like all of that combined to leave me now as a person / was a person growing up who likes to write stories wherein people from different backgrounds and with different sort of ways of existing in a space band together to make the world a better place. I could psychoanalyze myself for days. I could talk about sort of how I existed in fandom culture and how this way that I grew up sort of flitting between different things resulted in me also flitting between different fandoms, and how I never was obsessed with just one thing and still am never obsessed with just one thing. I have sort of a lot of varied interests that I collect that all have some spark of something that I enjoy, and then I pull them all together and it results in this very chaotic mess of like interests. So, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I'm sure there are others who exist in the same way, but I just, yeah, I write a lot of very complex worlds and systems and character groups because that was my experience growing up, and that is still my experience, and I just cannot enjoy a story that is just kind of one thing. And something I've had to learn in my publishing journey is how to pare down my stories to be a little bit more straightforward, because sometimes when you're consuming entertainment, you don't want it to completely mimic the messiness of real life in the complexities of people's like many varied relationships, but it's something that's always there in my stuff. So, and the final question is by Megan Lind Persinger, and it is, when was a moment you had to pivot and what did you do? I had a different answer to this question because there have been many times I've had to pivot in my life. I could talk about when I was working as a nanny and I was miserable. I've pivoted on books. There are times when I thought I wanted to write one book and I realized it wasn't right and I pivoted to a different one. There's lots of answers to this question, Megan. But the answer that I'm actually going to give you is something I'm going to talk about because I needed to talk about it with my channel anyway, which is that I'm currently in a space where I am considering pivoting away from AuthorTube. I've put 2 years of effort into AuthorTube now, and I have taken a lot of time reflecting on it recently because I'm in a position now where there is a lot of content that I can create. Because I have publicly announced a book deal, I have a lot of video ideas, there's a lot of reasons why things should be really good for my AuthorTube channel right now, and I don't find myself excited to do any of it. It feels kind of like failure to say that because, you know, I should have it all, right? I should be like in this position where everything is going great. I just don't think that I enjoy filming AuthorTube content with any amount of frequency. I'm not going to get rid of my channel. I do still want to film videos occasionally for this channel. I do like talking about writing. I like talking about my process. I want to give people updates on where I am on my publishing journey. So this channel's not going to go away. But I am at a pivot point right now where I think that I am going to take a step back from feeling like I need to do this as a frequent thing because I've frankly failed at that. I've tried since I started this AuthorTube channel to have a regular schedule, and I just don't often have the energy, time, or excitement to do that. So I keep promising that I'm going to upload once a week or twice a week, and then like just recently I cut it back down to once every other week, and it's like, Jasmine, if you're not having fun, if you're not getting anything out of this experience, why are you doing it, right? So I think I'm gonna take a step back and say, again, this channel's not going away, and if and when I get excited to do a video, whether that's a writing vlog, a debut diaries style video, a sort of announcement one day in like a year and a half when I can like open up arcs of my book, whatever it may be, this channel will be here and I'm gonna do it. But I am not gonna try to make AuthorTube a priority. It's not something that I am enjoying, And #1 advice for the aspiring authors out there, whatever social media efforts you do, you should enjoy it. I really thought AuthorTube would be for me because I love YouTube. YouTube is one of my primary social media sites, but I really loved my other YouTube channel where I did gaming videos and cosplay videos, and I've just discovered that the more booktube and authortube side of YouTube, while I enjoy watching videos in this space, I don't enjoy making them as much as I enjoyed making my like fun cosplay and gaming videos. So that being said, if you do not follow my cosplay/gaming channel, I'm gonna link that in the description below. I might be able to put it in the cards as well. But that channel, it's called Jasmine in the Sky. I've had it a lot longer than I've had this channel. I have not uploaded to it since I started this channel, partially because I haven't gone to any cons, but I am considering doing some more stuff on that channel again, doing some more gaming and stuff like that, because that's a place that I really enjoy, and you know, it's still a place where I can sort of talk about the kinds of tropes that I like and the kinds of stories that I enjoy, and maybe people will also find those tropes and those stories something they enjoy, and then maybe they'll want to buy my book because, you know, we shared those tastes. But you shouldn't just do social media because you want to sell your book, right? Like that, the reason you should be on social media is to make genuine connections and foster a community that you really enjoy being in. And as much as I love and appreciate the AuthorTube community, I really, really do love and appreciate y'all, I just find that it's not a community that I can exist in on a weekly basis and keep up that energy with. It's just a community that I come back to like once a month that I then get excited about. Does that make sense? I've been thinking about this a lot with regards to all of my social media. Twitter, for instance, I'm on Twitter like all the time, so my writing Twitter is not hard for me to maintain. And if any of you guys are not following me on Twitter, please do, because that is 100% the place that I interact with fellow authors the most. Aspiring authors, published authors, you name it. Twitter is my space for that. And so I feel like I do a better job there of keeping up with people and engaging with people than I do on AuthorTube. That's my pivot. I'm sorry if that disappoints y'all. I am still planning on doing a vlog to finish out my draft 6 experience with Daughter of the Bone Forest. I am still going to vlog the rest of my drafting process with Daughter of the Bone Forest and post it, so y'all will see that. So yeah, that was my Q&A video. Thank you guys so much for all of your questions. Please do check out those links in my description to those causes that need your support. Thanks again to everyone, and I will catch up with y'all later with another video.